What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of A1 Agents. I've got my good friends Andrew and Ryan Hill here. These guys are agents out in Florida and Georgia. They are Andrew is the CEO of a $95 million agency. Is it the largest Allstate agency in the country?
It is the largest Allstate agency.
And Ryan is the sales trainer for this humongous agency here in Vegas. It is the Mega Agency Conference that I was invited to for the first time. Andrew got to speak at it and dropped a ton of value, and he was generous enough to lend some of his time for me and my YouTube audience. And so, guys, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having us.
So, Andrew, I've got to, I guess, pick your brain or share with my audience what your story is, how you fell into this situation that you're in right now.
Sure. So I'm 31 years old, and I've been in the insurance industry for roughly 10 years. Graduated from college back in 2013 or 14. It's a little fuzzy. But I came out of college and had no idea really what I wanted to do. And so I took the first, office job opportunity that came my way, which was working for a State Farm agent. And my job was to be a telemarketer. And so what I did for the first 12 months of my insurance career was I would make cold calls to businesses, try to get past the gatekeeper and convince them to let me try and quote their commercial auto insurance, which was super manual. You had to get drivers, you had to get cars, you had to get all the information. There was nothing for you to plug in or check against, and I just, I hated it so much because it was hard. You would finally get a quote, 13 vehicles, 6 drivers, you'd be so stoked, and then like 4 of them have DUIs, and it makes the whole thing ineligible. And so it was incredibly, incredibly difficult. But I learned a lot. And so that's really how I got my start in insurance. Eventually started selling, was writing a lot of business for a very large State Farm agent. And eventually, Ted Todd started calling me, trying to convince me to come over and work with him.
Okay.
He happened to be just down the street from this agent that I was working for. And finally one day I took a meeting with him, and he was persuasive enough to get me to jump ship. And so when I came into work for Ted, that was around 2015. I think I was like 23 years old. And I told him I wanted to do outbound sales. And he's like, well, here we do a lot of direct mail. We do a lot of inbound. I don't know why you'd want to do outbound. And I just said, you know what? I'd rather control my own destiny. I'd rather make phone calls and make my own sales. So he said, okay. And I'll never forget this. He handed me a preloaded credit card with $180,000 on it. It was just all right, well, here's your budget to figure out this whole outbound thing, which blew my mind because I'm 23 years old, and I was just like, what? And so over the next few months, started seeing some success on outbound. He eventually asked me to manage a sales team, and so I did. And we had a lot of change on that sales team, and then after a couple years, took over the customer service team, and eventually became the chief operating officer. And then when Charlie Todd left a couple years ago, I stepped into the role of CEO. And so that's kind of the abridged and shortened version of my journey so far.
Got it. So you started pretty much from the ground up, from telemarketing into managing, you said service, so you've got to see all the different areas of the insurance business.
Correct.
And you guys also opened up in a different state, right?
We did. So in 2018, we got an opportunity. Charlie Todd, so it was Ted and Marilyn's son, myself, and Danny Trejo, who is our CFO, were able to open up a scratch agency. Basically, Ted gave us funding, and then myself and a team moved up there. And so Peter's, he's our chief revenue officer. He's not on this podcast, but he moved up with us and completely built the sales team. Ryan was one of the inaugural hires in Georgia, and so we kind of have an interesting dynamic. I'm the CEO of Ted's agency down in Florida, and then I'm a managing partner of the agency in Georgia, where I'm one of the owners.
Okay. So, all right. So, this is the largest agency that I have on my show, and so I'm going to do my best to, just to add value to both, right? Because my audience is both agency owners, and it's also LSPs and people LSPs, I think it's different for every company, but people just getting started, right? Just getting their insurance license. How do I increase my sales? And so I think that's where you're going to add a lot of value, Ryan, because you're obviously one of the sales trainers for one of the largest agencies. So, after hearing you speak, right, you're talking like some high-level stuff. I was joking with you, Mike. You made me feel insignificant.
No.
And it's just really cool to see, how far you guys have taken this operation of yours. Was it always that way? While you were there, did you just kind of like fall into like something and then fall into that operation, or like did you help? I don't know what the word I'm trying to say is. What were some of the things that you learned like from then to now? And I guess if you could speak to the smaller sized agents,
Sure.
like what advice do you have for them?
So when I came into the agency in 2015, it was, I don't know, I guess it was like a start of a time of a lot of change. And so Ted was kind of wrapping up his career as an active participant in his agency, right? He's always been the owner. He's been the agent, but he was starting to wrap up as an active participant. And so Charlie Todd came in and became the CEO of the company, and I worked very closely with Charlie. And so Charlie was really looking at just high-level, big-picture stuff, working a lot on the family business side, and really put a lot of trust in myself and one or two other people to really kind of like run the day-to-day operation with the people, because at the time we were all in office. And so back then, the organizational structure was relatively flat. We had no middle managers. Every problem kind of rolled up to like 2 or 3 people like that we kind of collectively just all handled as we needed to. And that worked fine. We had probably 40 employees at the time. We were all in the same location, more or less. And so that worked because you're there, you're in person, you can kind of tag team it. When we went to Georgia and the organization essentially split in half, we had a huge drain on like leadership talent because half of those people moved up to Georgia. A lot of people stayed. And so it became very apparent that we needed to push the org chart vertical and create middle managers and specialty type roles. And so that's where all that started. I came in a very flat organization, and then around 2016...
How big was the agency when you came?
When I came in, it was around $65 million.
Okay.
And so as of today, we're around $95 million. But, we had 40 employees, $65 million. And, it just became apparent after we opened up that other office in another state that we had to start getting more leadership help.
Right.
And so, we sat down and just very intentionally said, we need to start building the leaders for like the next few years, like right now. And so we identified 7 to 10 people that we thought were high potential and just really actively started to teach them about the back end of the business, encourage them to use their employee development dollars, and just actively trying to develop those people so we could later promote them into leadership type roles.
Right. When I think of like career development, like at my office, it's like, you could start as a telemarketer. Like we're specialized to where it's a service team, telemarketers, and sales team, right? And I have a sales manager and developing an ops manager. But this is all like literally recent. And so when I think of your agency, I'm like, holy cow, there's levels to this stuff, right? And so you can truly tell the people that are like applying to you guys, that there's a career path to this. And I felt like you had to learn so much so fast.
Yeah, so
based on what because the organization you were at with State Farm was nowhere near.
There was like 5 people.
Yeah. And you said you felt like you were at your pinnacle while you were there.
Yeah, I felt like, what I would say is like, I was definitely peaking at that time, right? Because I was like the big dog, in a very small office. I was the top producer. I was a big fish in a small pond, right? Mm-hmm. And, he was a big State Farm agent, one of the top producers. So I was like, I'm like the top producer at like a high producing State Farm agency. And then, I learned about Ted's office and I was like, wait, Ted's how big? He was 6 or 7 times the size of this other guy I was working for. And, now I look and I say, look, man, like we're the largest Allstate, but compared to some of these independent agencies, we're not that big. And so,
right.
I try to remind myself there's always like a bigger fish, right?
Yeah.
There's always a bigger fish. But to your point about learning quickly, that's one of the best things I can say about Ted is that the guy goes so big, so fast that you get 10 years of experience in like 18 to 24 months
right.
for someone because he takes risks. He's not afraid to fail. When he goes for it, he pushes his chips in. He's like, if we're going to do this, we're going to go all the way.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I learned how that could be so effective.
Right. I've got a question for you, and then I want to then definitely shift towards, kind of what helps your producers become successful and, helping, my audience that are more on the agent side. That question is, with everything that you could easily go and start, kind of just branch off, right?
Right.
And has that ever crossed your mind, or has that ever crossed your mind?
So when I went to go work for Ted in 2015, I told him, I sat across the table from him at the interview, and I said, Ted, I want to work for you for like 12 to 18 months, and then I'm going to leave and go open my own agency.
Okay.
And he's like, hey, man, that's fine, right? Like, come in, do great things at my agency. Like, anybody will hire you. Like, he's like, but I'm going to make it my goal to make you never want to leave. And so I said, okay, whatever. And so we got to 18 months and kind of checked in. I'm feeling good. And, 18 months turned into 3 or 4 years. And I just loved the organization, and I loved the culture, and I loved the people that I worked with. And, a lot of those people are still with the organization today. But I think that was like really the difference, was that I was just around like a lot of really intelligent, really smart, very ambitious people, and that made me want to stick around. And so
you also got to bring on and kind of nitpick who you have around you, right?
Yeah, so I got a lot of autonomy and a lot of ability to impact change, right? So I was kind of getting that entrepreneurial piece that I wanted without, the stress or the risk of doing that, at 25 or 26 years old. Do I think I could have done that? I think I absolutely could have done it, and it might have been rocky, but I think I would have figured it out. And so it became apparent to me that I had some really great people that I was working with that I wanted to keep working with. And that's why we worked, with Ted and together to say, hey, how can we continue to work with the organization, but then have our own thing at the same time, and then maybe, lean on each other and get synergies. And so that's how the Georgia agency started, was, hey, we have a different ownership group, but we have synergies between the agencies. So I am Ted's employee, but I'm an owner in Georgia, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the best of both worlds, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel extremely grateful and appreciative for the opportunity that I've got.
What made you, I guess, get so much autonomy so fast?
I have to really give credit to Ted and Charlie Todd on that. I think they're just so unafraid to fail. And, I think that lack of fear gave them the confidence, or the conviction maybe is a better word, to give people a chance to do great things, right? So, don't get me wrong, like, they gave me autonomy and I failed at things too, but they're like, okay, cool, like, let's move forward. And so I think just their overall attitude about failure, willing to fail and then being gracious when failure happened and then moving forward from it, I really have to give them the credit. I can't say that I did anything like super incredible early on. I think they came in.
Did you communicate, like, I want to, like, look, this is what I want? Like, did you go in there saying, I want to be the CEO, I'm going to run this thing?
No, I didn't. I wanted to leave in 18 months and open an agency, right?
Okay.
And so, like, I think they really played to that entrepreneurial spirit to give me autonomy to kind of be able to almost like run a little business within their business.
Right.
And so it started by building a couple people on a team, and then, building out the marketing and the CRM, and then expanding that. As it was successful, it was almost like a little startup lab.
Yeah.
They like sectioned me off in my own room with like 2 other people that we could experiment. And it was actually really cool. Back.
Can you talk about your operation, like
Sure.
from a bird's eye view? Like, what does your operation look like?
Absolutely. So we have 101 employees today. Around 50% of that are sales or sales related. So LSPs or LSPs who are training, could be telemarketers or SDRs, sales managers, Ryan, the sales trainer. We have about 30 customer service people. We refer to them as customer experience. And then we have around 20 specialty roles or operational type roles.
Okay.
And that can be anything from analysts to marketing to HR to recruiter, so on and so forth. And so we have 2 agencies, a Florida agency and a Georgia agency, where we share some operational staff. Florida agents only work Florida, and Georgia agents only work Georgia. And so I know for a lot of agents that we talk to, they say, oh, like, you can't, sell in both. And I actually think it's better that we can't, because you kind of have this separation. And so we've been in, for instance, we've been in a very rough rate environment in Florida. If we could do both, we just would have stopped writing in Florida and started writing in Georgia, potentially, right? I'm not saying 100% would have done that, but the incentive would have been there for us to do that. And so what it's given, it's kind of a control that forces us forces us to not quit when the going gets tough and to figure it out. And so that's kind of how the operation works today. Ted and Marilyn are fully retired. Charlie Todd is an owner in Georgia, but he's fully passive. And the operation is really run by just a really amazing group of, 15 to 20 operational and specialty and manager type roles.
Yeah.
Really great team.
You guys are specialized. Like they're specialized, and then there's you guys.
Yes.
And you talked about that a little bit at the conference, why you have it that way. Dig into that real quick.
Yeah, so, the main point I wanted to get across to people is that when you scale, you have a lot more challenges. The bigger you get, the more challenges you're going to have organizationally. So your organizational structure needs to change to deal with that growth. And a big part of that is specialization. And so, we weren't always as specialized as we are now, but as we continue to grow, what we usually find is, hey, maybe a sales manager is spending a lot of time looking at data. And maybe too much time looking at data to be able to do their job effectively. And that's something that we can look at and say, hey, what's slowing you down? Oh, I'm just spending half my week analyzing the data so I know where to work with my team. Well, that's a trigger for me to say, maybe we should hire somebody who's an analyst to look at the data and tell you where to focus. And even though that analyst might be expensive, the opportunity cost of that sales manager spending half their day in spreadsheets or looking at data models rather than working with their team, I'm sure it costs more than the cost of that analyst. And so that's kind of the way that we think about specialization. But, it's, for me, scale breeds more scale if you do it right. And so when you first start to scale up and you first start to specialize, you're kind of in uncharted territory. People wear a lot of hats, but it gets more clear as you go. But the further down the road you get, the easier it gets too. And I think something I talked about is you can swarm a problem from 8 or 9 different points of view or 8 or 9 different directions. So I gave an example of bundling for us. It wasn't as high as we wanted, but Ryan was involved in that from a training perspective, managers from an accountability perspective, marketing, from a marketing perspective. And so all these different perspectives came in on how can we all attack this problem right now and solve it in the next 5 days rather than in the next 5 months. And so that's why I'm such a believer in scale. And I think it just gets to be a lot more fun when you have a team of really great, smart people.
Right.
And because I'm able to let other people focus on things that they're really, really good at, I can focus on the things that I'm really, really good at.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, the larger we've grown, the more I've had to be able to specialize. But when you're just starting out, it's sales and maybe it's sales and service. At first, it's just do everything, and then. For
sure.
So very cool. All right, let's talk about the autonomy that you guys have for everybody in your team. Because if you have an objective, if you have an area you're focused on, you kind of let your team handle it kind of free reins as well. You give them autonomy, right?
Absolutely. Ryan's a really great example of that. So Ryan started, just like everybody else starts in our agency, he started on the phones, telemarketing for the first couple weeks.
Calling and transferring.
Yeah, that's how he started, just like everybody else does.
Just telemarketing, okay.
And then he was hired to be a salesperson, so he went into sales.
Okay.
Our top producer. And then,
How long before you're let's pull you from that role?
I was doing that for about a month and a half.
Sales?
Transferring, calling.
Oh, okay, telemarketing.
Getting people excited to talk to us, and then transferring live to an agent to quote.
Okay. And then you get into sales?
Yeah, and then
how long?
He was our top producers. How long were you in sales?
So my quick little background from me and the company. So I joined May 2018. That's when we opened up our Atlanta office. Before that, it was purely Florida. So when I was calling and transferring, I was transferring to Florida agents.
Okay.
But what that did is, I know there's a lot of people out there that hate the idea of telemarketing, but to me, if you're going to be in sales, that is the absolute best training in the world.
100%.
Yes. You can't bind what you don't quote, and you can't quote something if you don't win the beginning of the call. you have to win the beginning of the call, and it's just that repetition of hearing objections over and over and over, and not being afraid to like try new things, be stupid, be corny, be cheesy, but find ways to win and win consistently. And so, anyways, was in that role for about a month and a half. Moved into selling. My goal when I came into the organization was I think I told Andrew and the manager at the top, Peter Godley's our CRO now, but he's another example of that upward mobility within our company. He went from selling in Florida to Georgia sales manager when we opened, to director of sales, and now CRO of the organization. And so,
what's CRO?
Chief Revenue Officer. So he handles all revenue generating and growth opportunities for the agency.
Okay.
But so he,
I can't wait to have these positions.
It allows for like that mass growth.
Yeah.
It allows for, I know Andrew talked about it in the presentation yesterday, but having like trust in your people. And but anyways, I came in and I told them, I was like, I got two goals. I want to be the top producer, and I do a lot of interviewing now, and I do a lot of like hiring, and I keep hearing the same thing all the time from salespeople. Salespeople, if you're here, don't want to be one of the top producers. Want to be the top producer, and being willing to do whatever the hell it takes to get there. Like work harder than anybody else in the room. But anyways, told them that. I was like, I want to be the top producer, and so fortunately was able to do that. So won our sales belt, and then I got to brag on myself a little bit because it was a big milestone within our Georgia agency, but the first agent in Georgia to hit 100K in production. And because at first I didn't even think, in a month. And
100K?
Yeah, and I didn't, like, where I came from, State Farm, then Farmers, the thought of writing $100,000 in premium in a month is a joke. Like, it just wasn't even a thing. So, anyways, but when that happened, it was just kind of eye-opening, because then it was like, all right, now I'm going to start challenging team members and, like, the people I was working around to try to hold them to that same standard. Like, why be good when you can be great? And so, was in that sales role for just under 2 years, and then was promoted to Georgia sales manager. And at that time, I just came in and I had like one goal, and it was like Peter and Andrew had done such a great job of building that team and setting the bar high with our production. But when I came in as the manager, I was like, that was good and all, but I want to crush what we did when I was on the team. And so, fortunately, we were just able to kind of build a great team with very like-minded individuals who were hungry, who wanted to come in, who wanted to win, who wanted to be great, and challenge each other, push each other. And so we just started hitting like these monthly production numbers that that was like kind of like a far off dream when we first started. But anyways,
real quickly, I wanted to ask a question regarding like turnover. I know like with our agency, you know, I joke, and it's like around like 2 years when like I'll lose a producer. It's like 2 years for some reason. It's like that number. When you have an agency as established as your guys' agency is, with your leadership team, is that turnover the same, or like with leadership, is it different? Like you retain leadership way better than entry level?
I'll say two things about turnover. One that relates to Ryan being a sales manager, and then to answer your question directly, we have that same type of 2 to 3 year mark. It kind of becomes like an up or out type situation. And so when you hear up or out, typically what that means is, right, they get promoted or they get pushed out. And so we don't push people out after that, but a lot of people just like want out. They either want to move up or they want to get out. And for us, either one of those is okay. You know, we promote everybody from within. Like all of our managers have been promoted from within. And so the people who are moving up in leadership typically have a pretty strong tenure with us. And because we try to give people so much autonomy, and we have a lot of conversations around development and career growth and monetary growth as well, you know, the turnover has been on the leadership side or from the management side has been pretty non-existent, to be honest.
That's awesome.
And I think a big part of that is, you know, and I hope Ryan can attest to this, is it's like I try to talk to, and I know all of our other leaders do, to their direct reports, but sometimes I do to like only my direct reports, sometimes other people who are doing a lot in the agency. And I just always ask, like, hey, like, how much money do you want to make, and by when? And what I like to do is I like to know where they're trying to go, because it's a way better conversation to say, hey, like, here's where you're at right now, but, like, you know, what do you want to make and by when? And so then we can kind of work together collaboratively to help you grow and hit that number. And if that number is not realistic, then I can just be like, hey, man, that's not realistic. But now you know, and I'm not holding you hostage. And so I feel like we never get into salary negotiations in the agency because we're having development conversations early and often. And if someone can tell me where they want to go by when, I can actively work with them, or their manager can actively work with them to find ways to say, you know what, like, this is a way that we can give you more money, or hey, this is a way that we can give you more money because we need this, or if you get this skill. And it becomes very collaborative. So turnover doesn't really happen all that much once you get into the management point of view. Something that's really important I wanted to touch on for Ryan, though, like that I'll say is, like, to his credit, is that it's really hard to go from being somebody's peer to their manager. And so that's a big challenge when you're hiring a sales manager in your agency. If somebody was a salesperson who now becomes a manager of that team and they've all worked together, there's usually a level of, hey, you're not my boss, like, you're my peer. Like, I've been here just as long
you're
as
my
you.
homie.
We're friends.
I trained you.
Right, exactly. And so something that happens a lot when you promote from within a team especially, is that you end up having to turn a lot of that team over. And I think for Ryan, it was the same situation.
It's like ego sometimes, too.
There's a lot of that, right? And I think part of it is that, like, you know, as much as you try not to do it, is that, like, the type of person that I really vibe with that reports to me might be different than, like, what, you know, Peter really vibes with reporting to him and to Ryan, and vice versa. And so I'm a firm believer that you've really got to like the people that you manage directly, because if you don't like them, you can't do as good of a job. And so Ryan had to turn over some of that team, but to his credit, was able to hire some amazing people. Like, not only did he turn over some of that team, but he turned over and improved a team that was already producing at a high level. So I wanted to make sure that we gave you that credit, because, like, Ryan did an excellent job.
How did you do that? How did you make an already rock star team better?
So when I went into the management role, I'm going to give Andrew and Peter a lot of this credit right here. Very simple, but they were like, you got to figure out what kind of manager you want to be. And at first I didn't really know what that meant. I was like, so I went home, I thought about it over the weekend, and I'm a big football guy, so started thinking about the coaches through college and NFL, and I know that everybody knows, like, Nick Saban wins all the time, and I was like, but that's just not me. I'm not that, like, behind barking all the time, pointing my finger, yelling. That's just, and so kind of leaned it on Pete Carroll. He won in college, he won in the NFL. Every time you saw him on the sideline,
he's chewing gum.
He's smiling. He's
making one-handed
catches. Yeah,
high-fiving the players. They're jumping up and down, hugging each other. And I was like, that's the kind of manager I want to be, and I want to build that kind of team where we have that camaraderie, where it's a lot of, once again, just that hungry. And everybody talks about being hungry, but I'm talking about, like, the real hunger, like that to, once again, not be good but great. And so something that I was a huge believer in is leading by example. I did not want to, when I got into insurance, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody that I ever worked for, but a lot of times I felt like people were asking me to do things or telling me to do things that they were absolutely not willing to do themselves. And my goal was to be even when I went into management, was still to be the hardest worker in the room. And I was like, I can't ask my team to do something if I'm not willing to do it too. And I think just that us being online together, and we were fully remote at that point. I mean, this was short.
I don't know if you mentioned that, but you guys are fully remote.
We are fully remote.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was just like, I knew I wanted to lead by example. I think everybody's seen that meme where you got, like, the difference between a boss and a leader. Boss is, like, behind the desk with, like, a bunch of people out front pulling. The leader's, like, out front of everybody. So I wanted to be that leader. And so it was just bringing people in, trying to, like, instill that mentality from day one, but then being a part of it and not saying it and then saying, okay, you guys do it, I'm going to go do something else. It's like, no, I'm in the fight with you. And so it's just, let's find a way to win. Let's keep improving, and, like, we're going to keep pushing that bar higher and higher and higher. And cool, we just broke a record, but let's figure out, okay, now that's like our base level. Let's figure out how to keep going.
Okay.
And
real quickly, when you're managing remotely, how are you leading by example? Because like in an office like mine, where it's like open environment, everyone can see each other. How do you lead by example? Are you patting your, not patting, that's a horrible word, but like, do they see that you're on the phone closing deals too, or what does that look like?
So when I moved into management, once again, very clear defined roles. Our managers don't sell. And unless like one of our agents are out of town or something, we may follow up and try to close deals for them. But it was just, I am big on energy. I'm big on energy. I don't know how low energy people sell at a high level. I just don't. Because as a salesperson, you've got to move people. And one of the easiest ways to move people is through energy. And so we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning huddles on Zoom, on camera. Everybody's got to be camera on. And that's my job. That's my time to shine, come in, get people riled up and pumped up and be that motivational speaker and get people amped up. But then something that Andrew, Peter, and just everybody in the organization did such a great job of is they created such a transparent operation to where everybody can see everything going on. We have an internal scoreboard, so everybody can kind of see where they're at compared to their peers, but they can see me online too. Like if I would always tell them, like, if you have any question, like whether it's an objection, an opening objection, closing objection, bundling objection, like I'm there for you. Hit me up. Let's figure it out together.
You have them bring you a call, or what does that look like?
It could be a call. It could be real time, like while they're on the phone with the person.
You can hear it, listen in on it?
I could listen in. We like use our internal messenger.
You're like messaging them what to say?
Yeah,
okay.
So it was just being there for the team and just kind of sticking to my word, because I told them from day one, like, I'm going to hold you to a very high standard, but I hold myself to just as high, if not higher. And it's, but then yes, it was constantly like giving that motivation throughout the day, individually, as a team, collectively on our team channels.
Let me add something in too. Something that we tell all of our sales managers is that your job is there to manage a team. We're not asking you to sell, right? Maybe you close for somebody when they're out, but your goal is there to make their job easier, because we want our salespeople focus on what they do best, which is selling, and that's what they want too, because they want to make money on, they want to make bonuses. Ryan, can you talk a little bit about like some of the ways that you would like clear out barriers for the team? Because that's another way that you were able to lead by example.
So when you say barriers,
think about like underwriting inspections, all those like little minutia things that take people off the phone that you were able to help with.
Yeah, so one of the big things that we were running into in Georgia was underwriting homes. It was like a huge issue. And so we would go through, we would quote a home, we would ask the pertinent questions to make sure that we had it valued correctly. The inspector would go out and it would be something totally different. It was causing all these fires. It was pulling people off the phone constantly and like sometimes hours at a time. And not only do you lose their production during that time, but that's frustrating to do that for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And then it's hard to flip that switch and immediately go right back into sales mode. And so just kind of identified that issue and more or less went to war with corporate.
He's not kidding.
I went to war with corporate, and it was like I was just relentless with it, and no testament to me, but I was like, it's not fair to the team. This is holding them back, and anytime that we're pulling them off the phone, that's impacting their sales and therefore the money in their bank account. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to put as much money into their pockets and bank account as I possibly can. And if we got all these barriers like that, perfect example. But anyways, long story short, kind of had to battle up through Allstate. Wasn't easy. Ran into a lot of brick walls. Ended up having to go to battle with the two inspection companies that we were using at the time in Georgia. But ended up finding a solution that worked really well. They were the inspection company was really, they changed the way they were inspecting our homes, and it just made all of our lives a lot easier. Not only on the sales team, but also in our service department too.
Okay.
And something I would say is that, you know, when Ryan went from a manager to training and responsible for training all of our salespeople across the entire organization, a lot of that had to do with, the surveys we did with staff. And so we skip level. So basically that's when your manager's manager comes in and talks to you about your direct. And Ryan would just get these glowing reviews. People just loved him.
Oh, you guys are doing that? Okay.
Yeah, and they just loved him and just loved everything he brought to the team. And so his people loved him. So that was huge. And then he was able to improve an already good team. And so when we opened up, we got a new ECP. So I know not everyone's Allstate, but we got like a new scratch agency. And we knew we had to get off to a really hot start. We decided we were going to hire like basically another 10 LSPs all at once. And so I remember talking to Peter, our chief revenue officer, and I said, hey, I think we should really consider asking Ryan to take a role where he is just responsible for just the full development of all of our salespeople. And so we approached him with that, and Ryan luckily said yes. And I mean, to me, it's a testament to how much we trust Ryan for the culture that he builds, the energy that he builds, the knowledge that he has, and just his willingness to put himself out there for the team. Because we've put 45 plus people under his, like, we trust him to train everybody the right way, not only from a compliance standpoint, but from like an effectiveness and standpoint to be top producers. And we actually let Ryan make every hiring decision on the sales side too.
Okay.
It's Ryan makes the final decision on every sales related person that comes into the organization.
Right. What background, what did you do before this?
After college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. None. Ended up in personal training because I like to work out.
Oh, yeah, you did? Okay.
So, I know you probably can't tell, but I used to be in way better shape. But was doing that for a long time, loved it. Honestly, that's probably the love of my life. I would have done it forever if I didn't have to wake up at 3:45 in the morning. But I'm not a morning person, and I was having to train people at 5 a.m. like every day, and again in the evening. I was like, I just can't do this forever. And so got me thinking about like what I could do more long term.
You went from personal training to sales training.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so kind of tripped and fell into insurance. I too started at State Farm and thought that I was sold a dream of being a multimillionaire in a year and a half if you just work really hard, and then come to find out that wasn't the case. But
yeah.
But anyways, went from State Farm. I was training to be an agency owner there, working with one of the
same one that you guys came from?
This was in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Yeah, different State Farm agents.
And the sales leader, she just kind of took a liking to me and kind of was like grilling me, making me, once again, I made the mistake of telling her I don't like mornings, so she was making me wake up at 5 a.m. to role play boot camp with her.
Oh, geez.
2 days a week. And told her I didn't want to, and she was like, if you want to be an agency owner, you'll do it. And so I'm very thankful she did, because it's a lot of that role play right there. I didn't get that inside of my agency. And so the lack of training that I received in the agency, and then having somebody like that who was willing to invest that time into me, I felt like made all the difference in the world. So that really like kind of shaped my beliefs on hiring and training, because I was hired and thrown on the phones. My third week of selling insurance, I had a new hire come and sit with me, and the agent said, train him. Like, he wanted me to train the third week in insurance.
The blind leading the blind.
Yeah, so I was like,
to be honest, sometimes that's like the best way. Just sometimes it's the best way.
But it's just also,
I know you got to train. I know you got to train people, but sometimes just seeing how they act, like even if you were to do it in an interview, like, all right, hop on the phone real quick, just to see.
Fully agree.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I'm taking a long time here. But then, long story short, I left State Farm. I was like, it's no longer what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do the State Farm agency route. Went to Farmers. Was working for a guy, pretty happy there. But Andrew, I got a random LinkedIn message about, hey, we're thinking about moving up.
Is that where you're recruiting from?
That's one of the things we used to recruit. Okay. Yeah, I just messaged him like in April of 2018.
Yeah.
Hey, you were at State Farm. I used to work at State Farm too. Like,
okay,
an opportunity for you.
Moving to Georgia.
Want to talk? And he was like, sure. I was like,
okay, very cool. Okay.
But then the more I heard about the company and talking to Andrew, it's very apparent when you talk to him. Within 5 minutes, you realize he's good at what he does and he knows his stuff. And
yeah.
But also, like, there's a lot of very intelligent people, but there's where he is so good at.
Thanks, Ryan.
Tooting the horn here. I'm trying to get a promotion and
He's trying to get a raise and a promotion.
No, but he knows how to apply it, and he makes it very relatable. And so we talked back and forth. It wasn't even an interview or anything like that at all. It was just honestly, it didn't feel like it. At least
it was pretty casual,
and it was just
wanted to get to know Ryan a little bit and hear how he sounded on the phone.
Okay.
Just wanted, and then I think we went from there and kept talking. We did a formal interview. I'll never forget this with Ryan. And it's really just kind of talks to how focused he is on performing well. I remember we spoke originally, and I was like, why don't we do a more formal interview? And so I think we did. And then Ryan, I guess, didn't feel like he had answered the question to the best of his ability. So he called me later that night. So like 4 hours later, I was like driving home or getting ready to go to the gym or something. So I answer my phone. He's like, hey, this is Ryan from Roller. I was like, oh, hey, Ryan, like, what can I do for you? And he's like, I don't think I really put my best foot forward. And so I just said to him, tell me more. Tell me more. And so he explained and told me that like on one of the questions he thought that he could have answered it better. And so I was like, cool, answer it now.
Yeah.
And they did a really great job. The reality was, and I told Ryan this later, I was planning on hiring him anyways, but the fact that he cared enough to call back.
That was like, yeah.
And say, hey, I feel like I did a bad job on this. Can I take another shot at it? To me, it's like, I'll go back to that piece about being willing to fail and owning failures and then learning from it. Like, that was exactly what we wanted out of somebody to work in our organization. And so that's just really a testament to Ryan and his commitment to performing at a high level.
Yeah. That's really cool, man. All right, so I've got a couple more questions. The first question I have is, tell my audience about your top 3 indicators for agency/producer success. You touched on them yesterday.
Okay, so the 3 that we look at, what we'd call like our main 3 key performance indicators are quotes per person per day. Not households, not items. We just look at total quotes per person per day. The way that we typically set that up is we say eight households around like a 60% bundle rate, which kind of lands you between 12 and 13 quotes a day. Mm-hmm. So that is our expectation for our salespeople minimum. So we look at that and we manage to that. The second one is basically time spent off the phone. So we call them call gaps, but we are looking at every minute they're on the phone and off the phone. And so we visualize that in a chart. And so some time off the phone is okay, but we don't want to see big blocks or big gaps off the phone because that's usually an indicator to us that they're getting stuck on something that we need to help them with. Like Ryan talked about clearing barriers. There's usually a barrier that we have to clear. It's pretty rarely that they're just slacking off. People understand what's expected of them.
Interesting.
And we have a high trust environment, and so people work remotely, and we say, like, look, we're going to trust you to do what we ask you to do. You're going to agree to it, and we're just going to trust you to do it. And so people tend to live up to that. So we look for call gaps. What time did they make their first call? What time did they make their last call? And then what time, and that could be inbound or outbound, basically. Mm-hmm. And then the last one.
Nothing that drives me more nuts than when my guys or my team gets off at 5:30 and they stop dialing after 5:06.
Yes.
Like, what the hell?
Exactly.
What the freak happened?
Ryan is always looking at that, and so we do something called 10 or 1, which I'll let him explain. It's something that the best people do in our agency, but the last one is bundle rate per producer. So we look at quote bundle rate and sold bundle rate. And so we typically want to see that on the quoting side, 70 to 80%. On the sold side, over 60%. But we watch the variance between those two, because if somebody's quoting a lot of bundles but not selling a lot of bundles, they could be fudging the numbers, or they need some help on that product or whatever. And so those are the 3 things that we focus on every single day. And then we probably monitor 100, I'm not exaggerating, over 100 different metrics as needed throughout the month and on different kind of check-in periods.
Okay. Another question is, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
The call gaps, I've known about that, but I never heard it explained or as a metric. And so when you said it, I was just like, oh my goodness, like I can finally write it down as something that I'm looking for now. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We always ask people, we say, first thing we'll get is quotes per person per day, right? And so sometimes, we help some agents, do some consulting and help them with data or telemarketing. But a lot of times we always look at quotes first, just like we look at quotes for us first. And so sometimes people will have, 2 quotes a day or 5 quotes a day. And the next question that always comes after that is, well, what are they doing when they're not quoting, right? And do you have visibility into that? So AKA the call gaps, right? And so understanding why someone's not on the phone tells you a lot, right? If they're doing it because they have no will, then you maybe either need to turn that team over or instill some new accountability. But most of the time it's because they're getting held up with something.
Gotcha. I love the high trust environment, and you're just assuming that they're stuck on something versus just slacking off.
I want to build on that real quick. So the quote volume and call gaps, in a lot of ways, it'll tie together. And what I mean by that is from a training standpoint or when I was managing, same thing. It allowed me to really, in a remote environment, see if, because a lot of times newer agents fall into this idea that quoting off the phone is a good thing. And that's not. Like, you got to give people a price on the phone. If I don't have you on the phone, I'm not able to build value in the product. I don't have a chance to build rapport with you. I'm not making myself memorable. I can't highlight the discounts. And so because I've had that a lot in the past where I saw gaps throughout the day, but the quote volume was high. And so then it allowed me, I could go and listen to the call recordings, and I'm like, wait a minute. So they're getting halfway through a quote, getting pushed off, and then like saying, okay, well, I'll just finish up and email it over to you. But that's not an effective way and not an efficient way to sell. Mm-hmm. And so...
to that point, something that we always talk about is, if you're quoting off the phone, why do we need a human being to do that? A robot can do that. A computer program can do that, right? You as the salesperson are the difference, so you need to have them on the phone.
Yeah, I wrote that down. Quoting off the phone is not a good thing, so I had to jot that down.
Can we take one? Can you explain tenor one? So we talked about when's the last call of the day, so like 5:06. But can you explain tenor one really quickly?
Yeah, how long do I have?
You're good. You're good.
All right, so because I'm big on explaining the why behind things, because I don't think if people don't understand the why, you don't get buy-in. And so tenor one for me came about, you brought up like the 5:30 is like the end of the day, but people will stop making calls at 5:06. And something my dad, I'll give him credit, he was a career salesperson. But when I thought about making that shift from personal training into insurance or sales of any kind, he was like, do not watch the clock. He was like, I've been in sales for 35 years plus. And he was like, the people that run out the door every day at 5 or 5:30 are never the people that produce at the highest level. And they're usually never the people that get promoted. And they're always the people thinking that they're being slighted. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, you watch your goals, and you don't stop work until you reach your goals. Don't look at the clock. And so something that going back to like building a team, it was just like trying to instill that value of, we love work-life balance. I want everybody to like enjoy their family, enjoy their hobbies, and do that too. But my idea of work-life balance isn't necessarily running out the door right at 5:30 because the clock says it's time to go home. It's bust your butt, work really hard, and if it requires you to work until 6:30, 7:30, cool. But if that puts more money into your pocket to allow you to start doing the things in life that you really, truly want to do, that's the work-life balance that people talk about and want to get to, and where they're happy long-term and not just, I'm going to run out the door at 5:30 today, go eat dinner, sit in front of the TV. But anyway, so tenor one is this idea of, it's just at the end of the day when you're tired, you're mentally drained, you feel like you got nothing left in the tank, and end of the day is not 5:30. I'm talking about when you have checked off every daily goal that you had. But when you're ready to pack up your bag, close your computer, and leave, it's suck it up, dig deep, and make 10 more phone calls or one more quote, whichever one comes first. So if you make 10 more phone calls and nobody picks up, then what you spent 3, 4, 5 minutes trying to better yourself. But if you do get a quote out of that, you just give yourself another opportunity to win. And if you do that 5 days a week, maybe you get 3 extra quotes a week out of that. Mm-hmm. But so that gives you an extra, 15, 16 households quoted in a month's time that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Wow.
And what can you do with all of those additional households? And so, a quick little backstory on Tenor One and the buy-in where it came in for me. I had my best month ever in insurance at that point. I think I wrote like 84,000. It was one of those months where like the last day, the 31st, was on like a Tuesday, come in on the 1st. And I walked in, this is pre-COVID, walked in feeling really good about myself. Andrew walked up and he was like, hey, congrats on the month. And I was like, appreciate it, man. And he was like, but I expect so much more out of you. And I was like, what? Damn, like, what do you mean? And he was like,
not in an asshole way, I'm assuming, right?
No, but he ended up motivating. And I told him forever, I was like, I always want you to push me and challenge me. But he was like, and this is where he introduced the Tenor One, or I think I maybe heard it before, but this is where it really like stuck with me. And he was like, I want you to start doing a Tenor One at the end of the day. And at that time, he can attest, I was turning off the lights in the office almost every day.
It was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night every day he was leaving already. So he was already working hard.
Mm. And so I was like, I'm already the last one here almost every day. And he was like, do you want to be great or do you want to be good? And so it's like, all right, fair enough. Tried it out first day, made 10 phone calls, nobody picked up. I was like, whatever, it took 5 extra minutes maybe. Went home. But even on that day, it was like I felt a tiny bit of like sense of accomplishment because I'm like, man, whatever. I already had like a good day, but I gave it like a little bit of extra effort at the end. And I feel like that's something you can hang your hat on at the end of the day and feel good about when you walk out. But anyways, made 10 phone calls, nobody picked up. Second day I tried it, 10 phone calls and nobody picked up. And third day I tried it, and I'll never forget this. True story, not exaggerating. Called a guy, it was him and his fiance. They owned a townhome, they had 3 cars. It turned into a first call bind. And this is probably about 7:45 at night. But I think it was the 3rd or 4th call. But literally first call bind. So 4 extra items, 3 autos, a townhouse. And I was like, man, like that was awesome. That's 4 items that I wouldn't have had I gone home. And at that point, it like gave me a little jolt of energy, and I was like, it was the end of the day, things were flowing well, I was explaining everything really well, and I was like, I'm going to do one more, I'm going to do another Tenor One. And I ended up getting a second first call bind.
Wow.
I think it's like 3 or 4 more calls to get somebody on the phone, and it ended up leading to another first call bind. So literally, you give me 2 extra households bound on what I'd already thought was a pretty good day. But I mean, like you talk about like ending the day on a high.
Yeah,
it makes me think of that Ed Milet. One more. What's that? What's his book called?
We love this guy named Jeb Blunt, and he has this really short, great YouTube video. I'll send it to you if you want to link it. And it's just called like One More Call, and I found it later on, but it basically sums up the same idea. It's like just go a little bit more. And I've actually got another piece where I've got some math written out. So if you want to show that to your viewers. It kind of shows like in an agency with 1 LSP with like 5 LSPs and then like our numbers of if everybody does Tenor One every single day, what does that mean in terms of revenue for your agency? And you'd be astonished. And so I just want to add 1 or 2 more things about Tenor One. So I think it's important to note really Tenor One is at the end of the day. It's not necessarily 5:30 or 5 or 7:30, right? Everybody has to leave for different reasons. Some people have kids, they got families, they got to get home. We totally get that, and so like I don't have kids, Ryan doesn't have kids, and so we can work a little bit later. But we understand that not everybody is in that boat, and so that's why we always say it doesn't matter. It could be 5 o'clock or 5:30, Tenor One, right? Can you just put a little bit more time in, And then I think the other piece around Tenor One is that it typically means you're calling. Everyone's gone home except for you. And now those people who work all day and can't answer those phone calls or can't call in are now available. They're off work. Mm-hmm. They have nobody else they can shop with, and they just want to get it off their plate. And so you're talking to like people who are, working age people. And so the likelihood of closing that call on the first call is much, much higher. Because you're getting people who are just simply too busy to get the best price. They just want something that fits their needs and someone they like and at the value they need. So those are the things I wanted to add about Tenor One.
That's really, really good. All right, let's. I got some wrapping up questions here.
Want to do some rapid fire?
Yeah. So, can you dumb down? This is for you, Drew. Can you dumb down knowing your data the best you can? Because for people that are starting out, we just try stuff.
Right.
You know, I barely dialed into my numbers the last like 24 months, you know, and it's still a work in progress. But can you dumb it down for, you know, the best you can?
Yeah, here's what I would say. I think start simple. You know, I think I said this yesterday, is that like you can start on YouTube. You can watch tutorials on YouTube for basic Excel. You don't have to build like beautiful visuals or dashboards. And like, you know, I'm not the one building these things. We have people who do that, and they're just absolutely incredibly talented.
Well, how do you start?
But I mean, I think you've got to understand what it is that you're trying to look for. So I said yesterday, you know, focus on the leading indicators that lead to the outcomes that you want. And so the way you find those, right, is that you can try to use like gut feeling or common sense, right? We know that if you quote more people, you sell more people, right? So, but you can actually put math to that. You can run some basic correlation in Excel. Again, I would just YouTube like how to, you know, calculate correlation in Excel. So like, you just look up a definition of, you know, correlation, and that will give you one way to look. But it's really about understanding, what do I want to optimize for? Do I want to optimize for, sales? Do I want to optimize for retention? And then you have to kind of start working backwards from the result that you want and keep breaking it down into smaller pieces, right? And almost you've got to like kind of build like a journey of like, okay, well, if I'm an inbound agency, I have to, you know, build a list, and then I have to quote that list, and then I have to print out all that mail and then send that mail. And so I have to, one, make sure my list is right. Then I've got to make sure the mail gets delivered. Then I got to make sure the mail gets opened. Then when it gets opened, I got to make sure it gets read. And then if it gets read, I got to get them to take action, right? So, and that's just before they even call. Like, then they call your agency, and you're like, okay, well, now we have to make sure our salespeople know how to answer the phone right. And then we have to make sure it's competitive. And so there's all you can, if you break it down into all these small pieces. I know that sounds complicated, but just sit down.
It's simple but complicated.
Yeah, sit down with a piece of scratch and just start doing it, right? And then as you pay attention, you're like, oh, I missed this stat, and you build it over time. You know, Rome's not built in a day. You've got to start. And so, you know, I think that's the first piece, is like start small, think about what you want to optimize for, and the second piece is don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, there's a number of agents out there in the community who are good with data. There are software vendors who can help you with data. You can go on Upwork and find an analyst to do some basic data analysis. You know, I think even like at Allstate, and I know State Farm too, you can ask like your sales leaders, is there anybody at the corporate level in the district or the zone who can help me with this? And there usually is, but most people aren't asking. So it's ask for help too. I think that's a big piece of it.
Okay. And one of the questions I have for you, Drew, is, you know, how did you become such a good leader? Because, you know, when I look at your guys' organization, everyone that I've met, you know, the last couple of days, they're all bought into, not Todd, I think they're bought into you.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I could be wrong, but I feel like, you know, they're bought into you, man. So you want to talk about...
Well, here's what I would say, is that, thank you for the kind words. I don't want them to be bought into me, though. I want them to be bought into the organization. And I want the organization to be its own entity. And I think, you know, we were talking earlier, we look at the organization as an entity, almost like it's its own person. And so I don't want someone to join because they want to follow me, or because they want to follow Ted, or they want to follow Ryan or Peter. I want them to love the organization and follow where the organization is going. You know, I think that something I really believe in is just continued learning and continued development. We give all of our employees $5,000 a year for anything, like pretty much anything educational. Like we can almost always find a way to make a case to approve it, right? It's very rare that I'm like, you know, I don't think I'm going to approve that one. But like we actively encourage people to use that money. And I think I try to lead by example. I just finished my MBA, which people are always like, why are you doing an MBA like if you are like an entrepreneur? And I did it for knowledge, because I'm like literally able to take all these things and apply it to the business. I take cohort-based courses on Maven.com, which you've never heard of that. Like they have some just absolutely incredible stuff, learning from incredibly smart people. And so, you know, I think a lot of my development is that I've had some great mentors, you know, Ted being one of them, Charlie being another one. But I also read a lot, and I constantly try to learn and surround myself with smart people. And I try to learn from the people in the organization. And so, you know, if you're asking how I became like a great leader, you know, I don't know what when people obviously become, a leader, some leaders are born and some leaders are made, right? I don't know. I also just try to be like super human. Like I try to talk to people. I try not to be. I don't try to play any of those like power games or psychological games. I just try to like joke like I would any other person. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a person like everybody else. So
I love that, man. Well, you're very humble as well. I always say, I try to tell my team this too. Like, just try to be the same person, no matter where you are. Like, sure. I'm the same person in front of my mom that I'm in front of you guys, in front of my videographer Dave, my team. Just be the same person, absolutely. And I like that, man. I really like that. All right, so I'll ask this question to both of you guys, and if you guys want to, I have this question that I wrap up every A1 agents with, and it is the definition of A1. When I came up with that name, it's to the highest of standards, to the highest of quality. And so I like to ask people, whether it's in life or business, what are 3 standards or qualities you live your life by or run your business by? Pick one and kind of answer it. It might be the same thing, right? So we'll start with you, Ryan. What are 3 standards or qualities you live your life by?
Putting me on the spot here, man.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I like it too. I think one of the things that work ethic, I want to be going back to, sounds dumb, but when I was first job in high school at a little Caesars, and I was like, I just always kind of took pride in what I did, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room, I'm not the most talented, but hard work will get you a long way. The other one is I try to be very just open, honest with people. I don't like to put up a fake facade. Like, I am who I am, and I think people appreciate genuineness more. And the other one, it might sound dumb or corny here, but I like to have fun. I try to have fun in life. I don't life's too short. And I tell the team and people we work with, I'm like, listen, like, we want to make this a place you love to work. And I know that you're not talking about work in particular, but it's just like, happier people perform at a higher level. They do. And it's just, I don't know. I try to like kick back, relax, not take things too seriously, and get frustrated with like everybody else, but just try to like vent and move on and put a smile back on.
Love it. So we got work ethic, be yourself, and have fun.
Yeah.
I love it. How about you, Drew?
So I think, one of the big ones that I think at TTI, and I try to live in my life too, is leave things and leave people better than you found them, right? And it doesn't matter if that's like, you're on a hike and you see trash, pick it up, right? Leaving that hike better than you found it. Or if it's a customer who comes through, even if we don't write their policy, did we give them some good advice at least? Or hopefully they take it, maybe they don't, whatever. Or an employee, hey, somebody came in and learned here, it sharpens, and then leverage that into another opportunity. We see that a lot. We help a lot of people leave us and get jobs in tech sales, which, and we're really happy to help them do that. So for me, intrinsically, it makes me feel really good. I think it's really good for the organization and culture too, but it makes me feel really fulfilled and just good intrinsically, is leaving people and things better than they found. So I think that's one. 2 is I try to outwork people around me, and I think Ryan's the same way, and I think a lot of people in the organization try to outwork everyone around them, so you end up with a lot of people who work really hard because we're all trying to outwork each other. We're not asking people to do things we wouldn't do. And so when I was earlier in my career, what that meant to me was quantity of hours worked, right? If I was the leader, I wanted to be in early, but I wanted to always be the last one out. And, that made me work a lot of hours. And, I think it was good for that time. But the problem was even as a leader, I was burning out a lot. I was burning out, and I would have to take, I would take like a week off per quarter, and I even felt like it wasn't enough. And so later, after working with like a business coach who I still work with, she basically challenged me to rethink what I thought of like what was work. And so she said, how much time are you actually like actively doing things, and how much time are you like kind of like brainstorming and ideating? So I was like, well, I'm probably doing things like 45 to 50 hours a week plus ideating all the time. And she's like, do you think that ideating and like brainstorming and like creating a vision is not work? And I was like, I wouldn't call it work. She's like, that's work. And so that kind of changed my mindset. So now it's like I try to do I try to outwork my peers by doing the best quality work possible, right? And if that takes me 20 hours in a week or it takes me 50 hours in a week, that's what I'm going to do. So I think that's the second one, right, is outwork those around me, but now it's quality rather than quantity. And I think the last one is and this is a newer one for me, is that, as I've started to do better financially and just, even mentally, like, just trying to be generous, not only with money, but time and energy too. And so, something that I always tell people is like, we talk about it with Allstate agents. I always tell our sales leader, like, look, like, you can have anybody, I can give anybody my cell phone. Like, I will happily give anybody, an hour of my time. I'm happy to help however I can. I got a lot of help, in life and in my career. And so I want to be generous with my time, energy, and, and money too, and kind of pay it forward. So those are my three.
I love it. Awesome. Those are great. I want to acknowledge you guys. Thank you for being generous with your time and
Absolutely.
sharing it with me, sharing with my audience. I do this, I've had some awesome people on my show, and even though this is for my YouTube audience, it's actually like selfishly for me, you know what I mean? And so, because I get to hear this in real time, I really don't watch them after I post them because I was there, and I've been taking notes from you guys today. So thank you guys. And do you guys big on social media or people following you? If you do, I can give you guys, I can put in your plugs and people can find you if you want them to, or if you're not so much.
The one I'm mostly active on is LinkedIn.
Okay.
Pretty active on LinkedIn. If somebody wants to connect, reach out.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and you can put my email out too if you want. If people have questions, they can email me or whatever. If somebody wants help in their agency, we can talk about that too. We do some business services, but if somebody just has some questions or wants a little bit of time, happy to help any way that I can.
That's awesome. What's your email?
Basically, it's andrewftti@allstate.com.
Okay.
But I know that the double T can kind of be like a tongue tie
Okay.
people. So
I'll
make sure to send it over to you.
Cool. And you?
So we are about to roll out our we're trying to do this online platform as well, because I think we have a lot of great content to share. So footage to come, stuff to come very soon.
Are you going to be on TikTok or are you going to do Instagram? What are you going to do, Ryan?
TikTok and Insta. I'm going to do the Reels.
Okay.
And just when it comes to sales, a lot of little quick blurbs about how to stay motivated, push yourself, challenge yourself, and be competitive, how to win and win at a high level. And so I hope that it's something that a lot of people can take and apply and challenge themselves daily to hopefully hit numbers that they did not think were possible. So that will come very soon. But if anybody in the meantime does have any questions and would like to reach out, more than happy to give my time as well.
How can they find you?
So just right now, work email would be the easiest way, or LinkedIn. LinkedIn, just Ryan Hill, but
there might be a lot of Ryan Hills, though.
There's going to be a million. rhill1@allstate.com. It's RHILL1 at allstate.com.
Awesome.
Yeah, or you can go to tedtoddinsurance.com or marylandtoddinsurance.com, worst case, and put a contact form in and say you're looking for one of us, and it'll get to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Hey, look, well, if you guys got some value out of this video, I need you guys to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share. I'd appreciate that. And so thank you guys for tuning in. Till next time.